Genshin Impact has long been a game praised for its resistance to power creep. The ability to continue to use older units to clear the hardest content in the game is absolutely a massive strong point and continues to be a strong point in the longevity and enjoyment of Genshin Impact. Starting in Fontaine, the average unit power, in my opinion, began to increase by quite a notable rate. And in Natlan, we have hit an all-time high of power increase. So I think it's time to address power creep in Genshin once again. First, to prove to you that it actually does exist, then go through its history, and to finish off, we will determine whether or not that said power creep is a problem. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we build and test every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. Allow me to introduce you to the Abyss testing sheet. This is basically a formalized version of what I've already been doing. I got a lot of pushback from my tier list, and I basically wanted to show my work. I do a ton of testing with every single character, well, almost every single character in every single Abyss. I test every character, not necessarily always in every Abyss, and my entire tier list isn't based on just my Abyss testing sheet. It's all the playing that I've always done with that character. But I wanted to make a bit more of a formalized version of what I do that I could show my work. And if anyone's curious, I also have the recordings of these clears that I can show, and it's all with my account, so I know all the investment required. So this is the 5.3 Spiral Abyss. We are testing on the Snorlax, aka the Gluttonous Yumisaur, aka the Gluttonous Yumimamasaur. All the characters are C0R1 or C6R1 in the case of a 4-star, unless otherwise stated. And so this is where I sort of want to prove to you what I mean by power creep. So some people use a definition of power creep that's something like the game requires new units to clear and old units don't work anymore. I think this is a fine definition, and if you want to use that definition, then I guess there isn't power creep in a way. There still kind of is in a way, because even if you use old units, you still generally need newer supports for those units, generally, not always, and like what counts as an old unit and all that. But what I mean by power creep is that new units are better than old units. Power creep. Slowly over time, the power of the units released creeps up. That's what I mean by power creep. And I just want to show you, first of all, how many teams use Mavuika, just first of all, as their best team. So granted, I will grant a couple things. First of all, this Gluttonous Yumisaur does require Pyro. So if your team doesn't use any Pyro, it's going to be a tough time. He also self-applies a bit of Pyro, which can screw up elemental reactions sometimes, and he is resistant to Dendro. So basically we've excluded teams that do Dendro damage from this list. This list will be available on Tactor if you want to go check it out, by the way. I'll link that in the description. But obviously Mavuika's carry team is the best at 33 seconds, but her carry team isn't the only team that Mavuika was on that's really high up on this list. If we look at it, she's also on Mualani's best team. She's also on Chaska's best team. She's also on Cloran's best team. She's on Navia's best team. She's tied for being Raiden's best team. She's on Novelette's best clearing team. She's on Ayaka's best clearing team. She's on Yaimiko's best clearing team. She's on Risley's best clearing team. She's on Yalan's on-field best clearing team. She's on Yoimiya's best clearing team. She's on Ganyu's best clearing team. You get the idea. Mavuika is absolutely dominating the tier list in terms of, there's not a tier list, but the clear list. And yes, AoE Pyro is handy, but lots of these characters have AoE Pyro enough anyways. Like we're talking about a Bennett Burst is enough to clear those Dendro things. Shangling, obviously, Yoimiya's burst, Cheverus's burst is enough to clear them easily. You know, any Pyro character, Hu Tao's burst, Arlecchino's skill or burst. Plenty of characters have the ability to use any sort of Pyro to clear that. And lots of the characters, like for example, Bennett, you run Bennett anyways. Kazuha also, if you run Kazuha, he's also a free clear. Granted, I will be doing this for every Abyss. I'll pick one chamber that's early on in the Abyss and ranking out all the best teams, and we'll have eventually a database of all my best clears for all the main meta carries for each and every Abyss going back until 5.3. So not only is Mavuika everywhere, but Xilonen is everywhere. Xilonen is on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 So 10 instead of 17. Bennett, still very, very prevalent. Obviously, he's on 17 as well. Same as the Pyro Archon. Citlali is on quite a few. Citlali's on 9 of the top appearing teams. Although some of these ones are, like the yoimiya one is not yoimiya's best team. I have my second piece of evidence, which is that more recent carries tend to perform better. Mavuika, Arlecchino, Mualani, Chaska, Clorand, Navia, all of these are very recent carries. Hu Tao, obviously old, but this is C1 R1, so she's a bit buffed compared to everyone else who's C0 R0. This is Raiden, who is C2. If we go back to Novelette, he's also pretty new. We've got Ayaka here, but the thing is, melting Mavuika's burst is huge. This is basically Ayaka driver team. Gaming is here. He's even a pretty recent carry. Mavuika is basically the carry here. Risley. So, like, it's the recent carry. It's the Fontaine and the Natlin carries that are up here, and I'm sure Kanich would be up here too. It's the recent carries that are dominating. So that's my next piece of evidence. And then my final piece of evidence is looking at something like yoimiya. So I could do this for any character. I just did it for yoimiya since I wanted to also just do some extra yoimiya testing and figure out what her best team was. Keeping in mind she gets a big normal attack buff, so her personal damage teams are going to be showing up more than her team-wide DPS team. So Bennett, Citlali, Mavuika, that was basically, like, there's no synergy for yoimiya here. We're melting Mavuika's burst, and then we're switching onto yoimiya to do some normal attacks, maybe melting 1 or 2 hits, maybe, while we set up Bennett, Citlali, Mavuika again. Like, that is what we're talking about here. You know what? I should take out Shalonen and put Diona, or take out Citlali and put Diona in here and see what the time ends up being. I'll do that. Not for this video, but I'll do that. So this is working better than Farina, Yalan, Shalonen, where yoimiya is actually having some synergy on this team. Fischl, Chevers, Bennett. This one is performing as well as the Farina, Yalan, Shalonen because of the huge normal attack buff she's getting. Otherwise, Farina, Yalan would be outperforming it because yoimiya's personal damage is doing more of the team DPS here, so that's why it's closer. If it wasn't, then it'd be lower. We're just at the point, like, you look at Ito's best team, right? Farina, Mavuika, Shalonen. Mavuika is, like, a huge reason why this team is performing at the level it is. Granted, I don't have his weapon, but all of these teams, right? The Chaska team, the main reason is that Mavuika is melting Citlali. Mavuika's sub DPS is huge for both Clorand and Navia. Mavuika's sub DPS is huge for this Novelette team. So that is my pieces of evidence that the new characters are creeping up the power and they're dominating the clear times for this abyss, and I'm gonna, like, obviously it's gonna be for future abysses as well. Pyro, normal attack, abyss, blessing. This abyss, the first half, doesn't buff Night Soul, so you can't say that it's carried in that way. It's just that Mavuika is that broken. So broken that most DPS's best teams includes using her as a nuker. If you can find a way, especially since most teams play Shalonen anyways. And this is why I completely do not accept that Mavuika is a restrictive unit. Look at how many teams she performs on, and yeah, you need either Citlali or Shalonen, but most teams do run either Citlali or Shalonen. So that is my evidence that power creep does exist. There's obviously a lot more evidence I could give. This evidence is very specific to just this abyss, but I think I've shown why that it still applies to other abysses and future abysses, etc. Next, I want to take a trip down memory lane. I want to talk about, yes, we have some power creep now. Did we always have power creep? Well, Bennett, again, is one of the characters that has not been power crept yet. Bennett has not been power crept yet, even close. He's still on most of the top performing teams. By the way, if you're a main and you have C0 R1 or less investment on all of your account, and you have a significantly better clear from a different team, then feel free to message me on Discord. And I can try it out because, again, I build every character. So if I'm missing a best team, so if you think, no way, that's, Hu Tao's best team, there's something else, blah, blah, send me your clear and I'll update it as I see fit. I'll try it out myself. And hopefully this way I can I can use you guys, if you guys are better at some of these characters than me, that I can use you guys to make myself better. And eventually, we'll get all of these will be really, really good. I'm not trying for crazy speed run. I do my best with, 20 minutes of runs, 4 or 5 attempts or whatever it would be, assuming I know how to play the character, and then I pick my best one. right? Nothing too dank. Okay, so we had our first character, Tartaglia, Ganyu, Zhao, Hu Tao. This is sort of our first guard of good DPSs. And I think one of the coolest things about Genshin is that these characters have gotten buffs and they're still appearing and they're still clearing at solid levels all these years later, because they're designed to work generally well with future supports, and future supports are designed to generally work well with most characters. Like, we can complain that Natlin is Natlin specific, but Shallonen is a great support for everyone, not just Natlin characters. And I think that's one of the things that makes Genshin Impact so good. It would be really, really annoying if Shallonen didn't work with Hu Tao and Hu Tao fell off the meta because the new stronger supports don't work with them. I think it's amazing that they do. Eula, obviously. Kazuha. I do think Kazuha power crept. Yeah, did he power creep Venti? It's more like the Abyss shifted to make Kazuha better. Like right now, Kazuha and Sucrose are pretty close in terms of overall power. I think Kazuha overall slightly power crept because in terms of especially his comfort and ease of play and the grouping was so good at that point. So he did power creep in the sense that he was good with both buffing and grouping, whereas you didn't have that yet. So I would consider it like mild power creep. Ayaka, I do think Ayaka mostly power crept Ganyu. She's just a stronger unit that did more damage. Ganyu still did fine damage at the time, but I think Ayaka, especially with the release of Kokomi and when people min-maxed Kazuha and with the release of Shenhe in particular, I think by the time Shenhe came out, then Ayaka had properly power crept Ganyu because that premium freeze team was just better than anything Ganyu could do. I don't think Raiden National was very, very good. I wouldn't call it power creep. I would call it like just a really good team. Maybe slightly better than the other things. Ito definitely didn't power creep. Miko didn't power creep. Ayato didn't power creep. I would consider Yelan a power creep of Xingqi. I would consider Yelan a power creep of Swing Cheese because she does more damage and she does more buffing, and the extra Hydro application that Xingqiu gives doesn't really matter. It didn't really end up mattering in the end. So I would consider Yelan like very mild power creep. Xingqiu still has the defensive utility, so you might even just call it a different unit, but I would say they're similar enough that it's just like very slight power creep. Kuki, and then we got Dendro. So like Nahida Hyperbloom basically did the same damage as like a C0 R0 Hu Tao, but was like a bajillion times easier to play. So it was kind of like it was like a power creep at the low investment and with a low skill. So like people who were either not that good at the game or who had lower invested artifacts would have found Hyperbloom power creeping most of their accounts. So it was power creep for most people. Wanderer didn't power creep Zhao for sure. There's still an ongoing debate of who's better. Won't get into that right now. But Alhaitham, I would say at the time, Alhaitham definitely was the best DPS in the game, and he was the ceiling. He was better, like his Hyperbloom, his spread stuff. It was the best team in the game at the time, for sure. Very minor power creep again. So like this is like, we're seeing it looking back at the history. It's just like an overall very slight trend here and there. Everything is slowly getting a bit better. Linny, he's so hard to play that I don't have anything to say. I think Novelette, they wanted to release a DPS that was as easy to play as Hyperbloom. He basically solved the issues that the DPSs that got power crept by Hyperbloom had, which was that they were generally harder to max out their potential, and they were harder to both in play and in build. So like they're harder to play and harder to build. With Novelette's free crit rate and his crit ascension, and if you got his weapon, plus he's very easy to play, it was very easy for people to max out his damage. Plus he had crazy AoE and really good single target. So he definitely and he had some of the strongest teams in the game as well, even in single target. So especially when Farina came out, I would call it both a power creep and feature creep, as I've heard some people call, or quality of life creep or something like that. Kind of like Hyperbloom again, but in AoE, and it's just Novelette. Wriothesley, as much as Wriothesley is not like crazy, I do think he's currently the best on-field cryo. Kind of power creep, but cryo kind of, we all know how cryo is right now. Furina, in my opinion, definitely power crept most supports. I know people will say, oh, you know, you need a healer and this and that. It's like, bro, you have Bennett. Bennett, you're already mostly running Bennett. Like, most teams run Bennett, so you already have a healer. So what are you complaining about? But Bennett only heals in single target. Yeah, well, Furina still gives a great buff, even just from Bennett's healing. So I don't see it. I've never seen it. I always thought Furina was amazing. And she even brought up the meta of other healers as well. And she kind of power crept Yelan for a bunch of teams, in addition to obviously working very well with Yelan. So I definitely think Furina was some power creep. We can just see, again, this is where, in my opinion, with Novelet and Furina, it starts to go at a bit of a steeper pace. Navia, I mean, obviously she's the best Geo. She's still a very good carry, one of the better carries. Shen Yun, kind of power crept Jean. I mean, it's a totally different thing, but Chiori, I mean, definitely power crept Albedo. I mean, that's very obvious. Arlecchino is just easier to play and slightly better Hu Tao. Chlorand, as much as people, guys, I don't know. You send me your Raiden clears. Raiden C2, 40 seconds. Chlorand with Mavuika, 38 seconds with only C2 or Roran. Did Chlorand power creep Raiden, guys? I don't know. You send me your clear. Chlorand is mid. Chlorand is not top 5. Well, I don't know. She kind of looks like she's in the top 5 here. I don't know. Anyways, that's what I think. Sigewinne, obviously power crept Furina like crazy. She's way better than Bennett. So Sigewinne, obvious power creep there. Emily's kind of interesting. I feel like Emily isn't like power creep. It's like side grade creep. It's just like so easy it's like another quality of life. Like, if you're playing a pyro team like with Arlecchino, it's like, instead of trying to make sure you vape your hits or something, like melt your hits or something like that, how about you just mash and do more damage and to get the same clear times anyways? Like, that's what Emily's like. Mualani obviously gets crazy clears. They're just not as consistent for most people. And then Xiaolonen, the clearest form of power creep we've seen in a while. Just crazy quality of life, especially. The buffs last longer than Viridis and Venerer. They apply to all enemies, even after only activating on one, so you don't have to swirl every enemy. They apply in multi-wave, and they're slightly stronger. So overall, Xiaolonen is absolutely power creep, if you're asking me. Once again, if we get grouping, as I said before, then we could see Kazuha making a case for Kazuha again. Auroran, because Mavuika is so good, like Auroran has and like Natlan stuff is so good, and Auroran's got Night Soul, and he has like the buffing, and I don't know if I wouldn't call Auroran official power creep. I had him in a tier above, I moved him back down. Some people still think he should be higher. I'm not sure. I'm thinking we're gonna get another off-field Electro support soon, and then we'll talk. And then Chaska, and then of course Citlali and Mavuika, who I already made the case for earlier, and their power creep. One thing we also have is early Constellation creep, and I can't really show this on my account because I don't have very many early Constellations, but when you get a C1 of a Natlan character like a Chaska or a Mualani or a Kanich, or even a Fontaine character like Chlorand or Arlecchino, but especially like the Natlan characters like Chaska, Kanich, Mualani, the C1s are crazy. Their weapons are so good for them. And if you compare that to, if we go back to Sumeri, like a C1 Alhaitham that did nothing. A C1 Wanderer, like that's pretty good, but it's not crazy. Like C1 Ayato, C1 Ito, C1 Raiden, C1 yoimiya, C1 Ayaka, like these don't really do much. C1 Hu Tao is good, but that's sort of more the exception than the rule. C1 Hu Tao is great. And so I don't talk about early constellations much, but if you are the kind of person that invests in early constellations, you're going to feel power creep even to a greater degree than the C0 comparisons that I've been given. Now we have our proof of power creep. We have our history of power creep. Is it a problem? I gotta say, it's mad annoying that every team has Mavuika as their best team. It's mad annoying. I do not like it. Sam I am. Especially since Mavuika is not just buffing, she's actually doing damage. And it's like kind of just shows up your main DPS. Like when Mavuika comes in and bursts, and does like more damage than your entire rotation for your other DPS, that's a bit of a feels bad man moment. And I'm not happy about it, Bob. I'm not happy. So that's a problem to me. To me, that is a problem. I don't want to see that again. It's a goofy meta. When I originally made my tier list, I wasn't including sub DPS Mavuika, but after playing all these teams, that's kind of the meta. The meta is sub DPS Mavuika. And I don't like it, frankly. I'm not a fan. I liked it when the teams were more different. It's like in card building games, when new cards come out and suddenly all the decks are like using the same core, it just gets sort of boring. It's cooler when all the decks sort of use different things. And how do they counter this? They have to release new characters and new sub DPSs and new supports that are even better than Mavuika for certain teams. And frankly, I liked the niche supports better. I liked it when there were niche supports that were really strong for certain archetypes, not universal supports, and especially universal sub DPSs. So for that reason, I do think it's a problem. It still is the case, to some of yours all point, that you can still clear the game with old characters. You know, my Ayato, Bennett, Farina, Xiangling, you know, still getting 104. That's still fine. You know, my Chongyun, Farina, Bennett, Xiangling, 101. That's still fine. Old characters are still able to clear the abyss, no problem. But I don't like seeing Mavuika, you know, 15 times. Oh, Bennett's still set. So Bennett's 17, Mavuika's 15. So does Bennett still more? But regardless, at least Bennett is kind of in the background. Mavuika is just, it's sort of insult to injury. You know? So that's what I think. Let me know your thoughts, and please subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And if you don't want to do that, that is totally fine. Just watching the video has been more than enough. Thanks so much. Bye for now.